Have you ever stood at the front of a boat, one hand on the ramp, knowing the moment you drop it, people will die? That moment haunted me long after the war ended, because I was the one holding that ramp. My name is Anthony Russo. I was 18, fresh out of Brooklyn when I joined the Coast Guard. Not for glory, not even for revenge. I just didn't want to wait. We trained fast, shipped out faster. 6 weeks after boot camp, I was aboard the USS Caldwell, manning a Higgins boat. We were part of the D-Day invasion, Omaha Beach, the worst of the 5. At dawn, we dropped our boats into the freezing water. We circled the ship once, superstition, maybe hope. Then we began the 2-hour crawl toward shore. We carried men from the 1st Infantry Division. Young, laughing, telling jokes. They didn't know yet. Then the first bullets hit. German MG-42s, 1,600 rounds a minute. The ramp was still up. The bullets pinged against it like hail on metal. But I knew, eventually I'd have to lower it. "Drop the ramp," the coxswain screamed. If I lowered it, they'd walk straight into hell. "Russo, goddammit, drop the ramp." I pulled the lever. The ramp slammed down. Gunfire exploded. 14 boys dropped in seconds. Just dropped. 2 soldiers didn't move. They stayed behind me, thinking they'd be safe. One caught a bullet to the gut, his intestines spilled out. The other, a round took off his helmet and part of his skull. He was screaming, crying, reaching out to me. "Help me, please." I had no morphine, no words. So I did the only thing I could. I held his hand. He died at my feet, calling for his mother. Later, the ramp jammed, bodies blocked it. I had to crawl over them, apologizing with every step. I'm sorry. We pulled the dead in so we could raise the ramp. 2 of them, still warm. I went back 14 more times. Not because I was brave, not because I wasn't scared, but because if I didn't go, someone else would. And I couldn't live with that. I wasn't supposed to be a gunner. Growing up on a dairy farm in rural Wisconsin, I was just another kid with frostbitten hands and dreams too big for the county line. When Pearl Harbor happened, I was eating breakfast with my parents. My mother dropped her spoon. My father just stared out the window. The next morning, I walked 6 miles to the enlistment office. On my 19th birthday, I raised my right hand and swore an oath I didn't fully understand, but I knew it meant something bigger than myself. They trained me fast. Basic at Shepherd Field, Texas, mechanics school, gunnery school in Florida, then Alexandria Army Air Base for flight crew assembly. And when it came time to pick positions on the crew, no one wanted the ball turret. Too tight, too dangerous, too exposed. The others joked about it, said only a fool would crawl into a glass bubble under the belly of a flying coffin. I stood 5'1". They all looked at me. I didn't volunteer. I was just the only one who could fit. Being a ball turret gunner meant you were the first to see the flak, the first to hear the scream of incoming fire, and the last to get out if something went wrong. It was 3 feet across. I couldn't wear my heavy flight suit, so I froze in -60 winds at 25,000 feet. My heated suit failed more than once. No one complained. We were all cold. We were all scared. That's just how it was. We flew mission after mission. Over Germany, over France, over hell. The first few weren't bad. Our second mission, though, Ludwigshafen, it turned into a nightmare. A communication mix-up during a weather recall left our B-17 flying alone deep into enemy territory. We got torn apart. Number 2 engine shred, the tail blown open. I remember looking through a 4-foot hole at the clouds whipping past. But we made it back to England, crash-landed in a construction field, missed a pile of timber by inches. It was after that I started counting my luck backward. Then came the mission. February 22nd, 1944. We were told it would be routine, a decoy run over Denmark. Easy in, easy out, that's what they said. But up there, 25,000 feet above the world, there's no such thing as routine. And I'll never forget the moment we saw the Ju-88, saw it explode into the sea. Then realized we were next. The fire, the smoke, the pilot's voice on the intercom, asking the navigator for landfall. 20 minutes to land, he said. 20 minutes with flames crawling down our wings. 20 minutes to accept that you're not going home. I used those 20 minutes to crawl out of the turret, say a prayer, and wait. When the time came, I kicked one of the waist gunners out the hatch. He froze. I had to help him. Then I jumped. Parachute stuck. Had to yank it out by hand. And when I landed, in a muddy field surrounded by German rifles, I looked up and thought, this is where it begins. Not war. Not duty. The moment my boots hit the mud, I knew escape wasn't an option. 6 German soldiers surrounded me in a semicircle, rifles aimed dead center. I raised my hands. No sudden movements. My parachute tangled around my legs like a dead thing. One of them barked something in German, then motioned with the muzzle of his Mauser. I walked. They took me to a commandeered Danish schoolhouse, a stone building with broken windows and German banners fluttering from the 2nd floor. That night I slept on a concrete floor, shoulder to shoulder with other captured airmen. No blankets, no food. Just the stench of burnt oil still clinging to my skin and the faint sound of boots pacing the halls above. Morning came with shouting. They moved us to a transport truck, then a train. By the 3rd day we were starving, dehydrated, weak, but nothing prepared me for the Luftwaffe's interrogation facility, a cold gray building with a massive iron door. The inside smelled like mildew, fear, and old blood. They herded us into a vast waiting room packed with over 500 prisoners. The walls echoed with sound, moaning, screaming, cursing, begging for mercy. Occasionally a sharp crack, a single gunshot. It wasn't a prison, it was a theater of cruelty. When it was my turn, I was led by a one-armed German guard with a scar that split his face diagonally, ripping through his left eye like lightning across marble. He wore a black leather coat and carried what looked like a modified submachine gun slung across his chest. He didn't speak. He shoved me into a room with another officer. This man smiled, politely, like an old friend at a bar. Ah, yes, Sergeant Evan Walker. Born in Wisconsin. Son of Harold and Edith. Brother to Lila and Benjamin. Lives on a dairy farm. My spine locked. He reached into a file and laid out documents. My life, my family, my home. We know all about you, he said calmly. And I'm sure you'd like your family to know you're safe and well? I nodded slowly. He slid a Red Cross form across the table. Just fill this out. Name, rank, parents' names, and while you're at it, tell us your aircraft type, altitude, bomb load, targets, alternate targets. I scanned the form. Left it all blank, except for 3 things. Name, rank, serial number. The smile vanished. He slammed a pistol on the table. You don't think we know you flew a B-17? Write it down. I'm Sergeant Evan Walker, I said quietly. United States Army Air Forces. Serial number 392741. He hit me. The first blow caught the side of my head, blunt, fast, like thunder under my skull. Stars exploded behind my eyes. Still, I repeated it. Name, rank, serial number. He kept hitting me. The guard behind me rammed his weapon's barrel into my ribs every time I hesitated. I clenched my jaw so hard I felt something crack. Then the officer drew the pistol again, pointed it straight at my temple. You better answer the next question, he whispered, or else. The room fell quiet. I looked him in the eye and said again, Sergeant Evan Walker, serial number 392741. He didn't shoot. He kicked me across the face instead. I hit the floor, crawled back up, my face was bleeding, my ears rang. But I was still alive, and I'd given him nothing. Later, I learned something chilling. If I had told him even a single detail, altitude, aircraft mission, he would have known I was breakable. And he would have kept going. Beaten me senseless until I gave more. Every scrap of information turned into pain, turned into leverage. But I gave them nothing. Because even then, deep down I knew. The fight wasn't over. It had just changed form. After the interrogation, they gave us food. A crust of bread smeared with something purple. Beets, maybe? I didn't care. I hadn't eaten in days. It could have been dirt, and I still would have eaten it. Then they took our shoes, just like that. Lined us up in the snow, forced us to strip off our boots and socks, and marched us barefoot to the nearest rail station. The slush soaked through the bandages on my face. I could barely feel my feet anymore. That was the point. The cattle cars were already waiting, dark, wood-paneled, no windows, no heat. They shoved us in with bayonets, shouting, jabbing, forcing bodies deeper into the car until we couldn't even shift our weight. You could barely lift your arm, let alone sit. And when the last man was in, the doors slammed shut with a finality that made your chest tighten. Inside, it was hell. No food, no water, no air, just the stink of sweat, blood, and human waste. Some men passed out. Others stood with their eyes open, murmuring prayers. I tried not to breathe too deeply. 12 hours later, we stopped. Not for rest, not for mercy, but to be loaded onto a coal ship. They herded us down into the cargo hold, more bodies jammed into a steel coffin. There were no ladders, no lights, no ventilation. Just darkness and the crunch of coal dust beneath our feet. 3.5 days. That's how long we stood down there, cramped, starving, delirious from thirst. Every breath coated your lungs in soot. We had no latrine, no corner to hide in. Men relieved themselves where they stood. Some collapsed, some cried. Others just stared forward like statues, eyes dead and dry. And then, sunlight. Not because it was over, because they wanted to humiliate us further. We were marched out, given our coats, and shackled in pairs, wrist to wrist, ankle to ankle. A German officer stood at the gate with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Today," he said, "is your lucky day. 2 Red Cross parcels, not 1. He handed me 2 boxes, precious, life-saving food. I nearly cried. Then he gave the next order: fix bayonets, and release the dogs. What followed was 5 kilometers of agony. German police dogs snapping at our heels, guards jabbing us in the back, and parcels falling from men's arms, scattering onto the dirt. That was the plan. They gave us the parcels so they could point at the trail behind us and say, "See, they didn't want them. They threw them away." By the time we reached the new camp, we were delirious from heat and dehydration. The guards laughed as they threw water at us, mocking, not helping. Then someone started singing, one voice, hoarse and broken, "God bless America." Then another, and another, until dozens of us were singing through cracked lips and swollen tongues, defying the silence they'd forced on us for weeks. That moment, as stupid as it sounds, reminded me I was still human. The Germans didn't like that. They gave the order, "Stop singing or be shot." We stopped. But in that moment, something inside me lit back up. Hope, or maybe just pure, stubborn rage. They tried to strip us bare, literally. The next day, they began the strip searches. One by one, each man forced to undress, surrender his Red Cross parcel, and endure whatever petty violence a guard could think of. When my turn came, it was him again. We called him Ham Hands, a brute from the previous camp who'd delight in clubbing your arches with the butt of his rifle or slapping your ear until your eardrum popped. I tried to speak German, told him those were my parcels. Red Cross. I had a right. He pistol-whipped me across the jaw, 5 times. By the end, my face was a bloody mess, and my ribs screamed with every breath. I surrendered the parcels, but when his back was turned, I grabbed what was left of my belongings and vanished into the crowd, slipping beneath a pile of overcoats, pretending to be one of the already searched. He came looking, cursing, roaming, searching. He passed me twice, but he never found me. And that night, as I bled into someone else's coat, I made a promise. If I ever got out of this alive, I'd remember everything. When the Russians got close enough for us to hear their artillery, rumbling like distant thunder, the Germans panicked. There were no camps left to move us to, no structures, no plan, so they did the only thing they could. They forced us to march. 86 days. That's how long the so-called evacuation lasted, but we called it what it was, the Death March. There were no supply lines, no trucks, no food depots, no rest stops, just frostbitten roads, endless fields, and desperate men stumbling westward through the worst winter I'd ever known. Each night, if we were lucky, we slept in a farmer's barn. Most nights, we curled up in open fields, sharing one blanket between 5 men. I remember trying to press my chest into the earth to steal its warmth, only to realize the ground was frozen solid. The snow never stopped, the wind never died, and the guards never blinked. Some men couldn't walk anymore. Their feet were black from frostbite, swollen with infection, or cut to ribbons from the lack of shoes. I watched a friend of mine collapse in a ditch after slipping on ice. One of the guards didn't even slow his pace. He just turned, fired a single shot into the man's back, and kept walking. No burial, no name, just snow. You learn to move like a machine, one step, another, then another. You learn to ignore the hunger, the cramps, the chattering in your jaw that never stopped. We ate anything. Tree bark, worms. Once I saw a man chew on a strip of leather from his own belt. We drank from mud puddles when the guards weren't looking. The risk of dysentery was worth it. Our lips were split, our tongues felt like dry cloth. And yet, despite everything, somehow, we kept going. I don't know what drove me. Maybe it was spite. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was that voice in the back of my head whispering, "You made it this far. Don't you dare give up now." We finally reached what was left of a village. A shell, really. Charred houses, burned fields. The war had come and gone here like a wildfire. That night, the guards let us collapse into the rubble. We thought we'd rest, maybe die. Instead, just before dawn, we saw the impossible. British uniforms. They didn't kick down the door. They didn't shout. They just walked into the barn, bayonets lowered, and looked at us like we were something they'd never seen before. Maybe they hadn't. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were skin stretched over bones, hollow eyes, torn coats, and fingers locked into claws. The medics treated us gently, like someone might break if you touched them too hard. And some of us did. When they gave us warm broth, I cried. When they brought razors and let us shave, I looked at my reflection and saw a stranger. I hadn't seen my own face in over a year. It was all there in the mirror. The scars, the stubble, the sunken cheeks. And behind the eyes, something colder. I wasn't proud of what I had to do to survive, but I was alive. And after what we'd been through, that was enough. They say freedom is something you're born with, but I don't believe that anymore. Freedom is something you earn by understanding what life is like without it, by feeling the weight of shackles on your wrists, by watching men die because they stepped too slow, by being treated like less than an animal. Only then do you grasp what it means to be free. When the British liberated us, they gave us food, medicine, and warm beds. They offered us baths, real ones. I hadn't felt hot water on my skin in over a year. I wept when I saw steam rising from the tub. I wept again when they handed me a clean towel. But the strangest moment came later. I was sitting alone, freshly shaved, wearing borrowed clothes, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, when I noticed a window, not a barred window, not one with shutters nailed shut. Just glass, clear, fragile, and sunlight poured through it like a river. For over a year I hadn't really seen the sun, not like that, not without a guard standing behind me, not without blood somewhere in the snow. I walked up to that window, and for a long time I just looked, at the trees, at the wind bending the branches, at a bird pecking at the mud, all of it so ordinary, so profoundly beautiful. That was when I realized I wasn't just lucky to be alive. I had a responsibility to stay alive, to carry these memories, to tell these stories, to make sure people never forget what can happen when humanity loses its way. Years later, I stood in front of a high school auditorium, speaking to students who'd only read about the war in textbooks. One of them asked what I was most proud of. I didn't talk about surviving. I didn't talk about escaping. I didn't even mention the medals. I said this: I'm proud I never gave in. I never betrayed my country. I never lost my soul, even when everything else was stripped away. And the room went silent. Because in that moment, they understood. We live in a world where people take freedom for granted, where liberty is assumed, not valued. But I've lived in the absence of freedom. I've tasted hunger, cold, pain, and fear, all administered with purpose by men who thought they had the right. And still I came back, not because I was brave, but because I believed in something greater than fear. My name is Raymond Whitaker. I was a farm kid from Ohio, a ball turret gunner, a PABU, and a survivor. If you remember anything from my story, remember this: freedom isn't free, but it's worth every step of the march. If this story moved you, if it made you pause and reflect on what freedom truly means, then don't let it end here. Hit the like button, not just for the video, but for the men who never made it home. Subscribe to hear more untold stories of courage, survival, and sacrifice. And share this video with someone who's never known what it's like to fight for every breath. Drop a comment below. Let us know what part of Raymond's journey hit you hardest. We read every word. Because stories like this aren't just history. They're warnings, they're reminders, they're legacies. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay free, stay grateful, and never forget.